So welcome everybody, my name is Professor Neil Hare. I'm an Associate Professor of Marketing over at the E. Philip Saunders College of Business, and I'm passionate about the area that you're about to listen to. We've got some cracking speakers for you. They're going to talk to you about the interviewing process for you creative types, and so we should have some fun with that. So from now until about 2 o'clock, we'll be asking questions about whether or not you're special and different, and I think we already know the answer to that. Yes, you are. So how can we actually influence the interview process so that you go through those various steps so that you're the one that's chosen at the end of it? How you can prepare yourself and that glorious portfolio that you'll have developed at RIT over the years, and the best things that we've seen from people in your positions that have ended up with these really creative posts. We're joined by, immediately to my left, Barbara. I'm not even going to try and butcher your last name. It's the nice thing about being English. I get a lot of excuses not to say people's foreign names if they sound very foreign. It's spelled T-E-G-A-D-A. Tejada?
Tejada.
I butchered it. There we go. Lovely. Creative Recruiting Manager at Ogilvy and Marthas. A distinguished career by the looks of it. Interactive Advisory Board member before that. North American Recruitment Manager for AKQA. She's also pursued the dark art of teaching at Miami Ad School. And lots and lots. In fact, I think there are about 3 pages of experience. So there's a lot here that we can learn from. Miami Ad School is her formal education, also Carnegie Mellon University. So welcome. Very pleased to have you here. Likewise, we have Robert Lee immediately to her left, who's one of ours, an RIT from 91 to 94, and MCC before that, so welcome home. It's always nice to have people back that have suffered 3 long or 4 long, very hard years like you guys have as well in the audience. And he is the creative director of Adidas, and I'm English, so I'm going to say it correctly, Adidas, none of this Adidas rubbish, but he's also been the VP of Design for Basketball US Sports, VP of Design generally at the Adidas Group, and before that, Design Director at Reebok International, so a phenomenal background, an awful lot of experience that I'm looking forward to him sharing with you today. To his left, we have Carolyn Ernst, Bloomingdale's recruiter. Again, phenomenal experience here across many different functions by the looks of it, from HR manager at Talbot's right through to a showroom manager for Esprit, but now creative recruiter for Bloomingdale's. Phenomenal stuff. And I'm also an RIT alum, so welcome home again. Very proud to have you back with us. And to her left, we have Tim Barber, who's the owner and executive creative director for Odapod. Before that, he was VP Creative Director for Rare Medium, a phenomenal company way back when, and also owner and creative director of Circumstance. So a lot of different experiences here that hopefully they're going to share with you. But before we get started to the questions, I'd just like them to individually, if you don't mind, introduce yourselves, tell us who you are, and why you're here today.
My name is Barbara Tejada. I'm the Creative Recruiting Manager out of New York for Ogilvy and Mather. I'm here today to find great talent. This is the time of year for recruiters especially to go out to a lot of the creative schools and programs and disciplines. People are getting ready to graduate either with their degree, or they're looking for internships this summer, and that's who we're looking for. Especially we come to a place like RIT because we're looking for great designers, people who think strong within interactive and digital, and we're always looking for great creative talent. So that's why I'm here.
Lovely. Thank you. And next, Rob.
Hi, I'm Robert Lee. I live in Portland, Oregon. That's where our U.S. headquarters is for Adidas, as he would like to say Adidas. We say it both ways, but most of the part, it's Adidas, and it's rooted in Adi Dassler, our founder. But the reason why I'm here is because I believe in giving back and making sure that students understand, at least coming to Adidas, what we look for in design, and to support the arts and the evolution of how students go through their careers. And also, I mean, I'm alumni here, and it's important for me to come back and connect because this is where I came from, and I wish I, had the opportunities here to meet different people, and I'm glad the arts program has us now that you can come and meet companies and do that. But overall, I'm really excited. I can't wait to see some cool stuff today and what you guys have been working on.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Ernst. I am very proud to be back as an RIT alum. I represent the print marketing, the store design, the public relations, and the visual merchandising areas at Bloomingdale's. I'm here in partnership with the recruiters from our bloomingdales.com website. I am here, of course, to look for great talent, just like everybody else is, but I'm also here to spread the word about the great work that we're doing at Bloomingdale's on both the print as well as the interactive side. So I'm looking forward to a great interchange with all of you here. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm Tim Barber. I'm the Executive Creative Director at Odopod in San Francisco, and I'm here for pretty much the same reason. I want to hire a few great people. I only make one recruiting trip a year, and it's here because it's proven so fruitful over the years, so I'm really looking forward to meeting some of you today.
Well, thank you. If I can just remind you as well to eat the microphone for me when you talk, that'll help with the audio. Great, thanks very much.
All right.
Not literally, of course. Okay, we have some questions to sort of get the ball rolling, and then what we'll do is we'll turn it over to you, the audience, to ask your own individual questions. These are very general, but I think they cut to the chase in terms of what you need to know before you leave this wonderful, prestigious university of yours. The first question is, what do you suggest for students, panelists, as far as pre-interview preparation? What should these guys be doing before they even knock on your door or before that?
Understand who you're interviewing with and what they do.
Yeah, I think it can be valuable to actually ask the person. I don't do the first few rounds of screening at our company. We have people that do a couple of rounds before I meet with people, but to ask those people that are screening for interviews just what to expect, because they can give you tips into the personalities of the people you're going to be meeting with and what they're interested in, their sort of style of interview. I think that's a really good place to start, and then definitely a little bit of research on the company and those people once you know. You never want to go into an interview not having a few questions about the company or about the nature of the work, because if you do, you just look like you're disinterested.
Research is incredibly important about the company as well as the people that you're going to be interviewing with, but also really think about how your portfolio relates to their brand objectives and their brand image, and tailor it to what you think best represents your work as it relates to that.
Yeah, I would also add, sorry to jump in one more time, to edit what you're going to show. Like, your portfolio may have a lot of work in it, but I don't want to sit and look at work for 45 minutes straight. I think it's good to pick a few things to share, things that you think are indicative of the kind of work you want to do, and sort of a combination of that and the kind of work that company does. Like, if you use that as a filter and you pick a few things, it's going to be a more productive interview because you can spend a little bit more time talking about the work, and there's more likely to be a connection around the work. So I think maybe in addition to the research, like really kind of carefully selecting what you want to share would be smart.
Yeah, I would.
Go ahead. No.
Yeah, I would just reiterate all of that, and I think especially when you're coming in, knowing as much about the company and who you're meeting with, you can find a lot of it online. And I'm usually, as Tim said, he's usually a couple rows down in the terms of the screening. I'm one of the first screeners. So when people come to me and they know a lot about my company or the position, or just know something about what we're all about, it definitely helps me want to keep moving them through the process.
I'm not one of the first screeners either. We have our human resources department, but usually what gets me is the portfolio at first. So that will get you in the door in a sense, but some of the things that we do as a brand to interview is we ask them to give us their perspective on sport and how sport has influenced them in their life. And I always think, when I talk about understand who you're interviewing with, is that hopefully you're culturally connected to what you're interviewing for or what you want to do. And with that, we've had some pretty good experience. And when you get to an interview at Adidas, we have more of a structure on, we make you do a presentation and we give you kind of a format. So it helps you through your presentation overall. But then to Tim's point, we like you to pick out some select things, but we also like you to talk about what you are as a person and how you are in a brand or how you perform, some of the things that you're interested in, because there's so much about design that's design, but there's so much about you working in a team culture that's really important.
So I'm hearing that they should fully deploy the skill set that they are already excellently demonstrating when they Facebook stalk people, essentially, and all the rest of it. To move that one stage further, what do you guys do to stalk your candidates? What sort of things do you look at when it comes to pre-screening before they even get through the door? What are the steps that you take? Could you share some insights with us on what they might consider doing or not doing before the interview itself?
I would say they need to spend 4 years in school producing great work. I mean, really, it's like 80 or 90% of it's the portfolio. It opens the door, it gets you the job. The rest is, helpful, and there are some other important ingredients, but it's in the work or it's not for the most part, I think.
And an impeccably written resume with no spelling errors.
Yeah. It's always different for me. It depends on the creative director that's looking at them. Some of my creative directors just look at strictly the book and go on my word. Some of them do their own Googling and will Google you guys and will look at your Facebook pages and I look at to see what people are saying on Twitter, if they have robust Twitter feeds or if they're just chatting up with their friends. It's just interesting to get a bit of a background on someone, but it's also, you have to be careful what's said about you online, what pictures you're putting up online. That's all stuff you're kind of warned about, but there are actual people in some agencies that will look at that.
Lovely, thank you. Second question for you, what's the best way to incorporate a portfolio into the interviews? You've got a portfolio, but how do we incorporate that most effectively in the interview itself? Good practice, bad practice, case studies you'd like to share?
Just how we do interviews at Adidas is generally I'll invite the design team. If a candidate gets to the point where we're going to bring them in, I'll invite the design team to be there. So a book to hand around sometimes can be difficult if that's the technical part of what we're doing. So we tend to use projectors or laptops to project the sketches or whatever if you have sketchbooks or things that can assist in it, but that's generally how the format that we would view things.
Yeah, we're a digital shop, so it's pretty much always a presentation. The interviews kind of go the same way almost every time. We spend about 75 to 80% of the time we just say, take us through your work. And usually we suggest that you, like I said earlier, that you pick a few projects that are important to you and relevant to us. And then we usually wrap up the interview with, just asking if you have any questions about the company, the job, the nature of the work. And, you'd be surprised how many people just like, oh, I don't know. You'd also be surprised how many people come into an interview and say, well, what do you want to see? Like, I don't want to see anything, like, what do you want to show me? I think you just have to have a little bit of a plan for it and have prepared. I think the work, like I said, is the lion's share of the critique. Like, we're probably going to make the decision based on the work. But the other part, the questions are valuable, and even the way you present the work is valuable, because what we're looking for is to see if you're smart. And so I would say that the presentation of the work should be like really clear and concise. Like, don't kind of run on. If you don't have anything more to say, just end it. Like, it can, each project doesn't have to be really long. Clear, concise, because I think what comes out of that is a sensibility for whether you can organize your thoughts. And, in an office environment like ours, we're a pretty small company, we're about 60 people, but, you have to be able to make the case for your work, both to, your coworkers and to creative directors and ultimately, even within a couple of years, to clients. And that ability to sort of organize your thoughts and convey them is an increasingly important aspect of the job over time. But out of the gate, it is mostly the work.
I think to be able to explain the logic of your thought process in particular projects, to just segue onto that, is really important, because that gives the interviewer the indication that you can think logically and you can think through a process and that you can be strategic in your thinking as it relates to your individual projects as well as your workload.
And I think just being able to articulate your work But if you take it a step further, and I think this is where I've hired a lot of people in my life that could render amazingly and could do amazing things from sketches, but their conceptual background wasn't as strong, and that's a really hard thing to teach and to mentor, and to be in a fast-paced company like the one I'm in, sometimes we don't have that time to do that. So any way we can uncover their conceptual thought process and how they think of that idea and how you convey that in the interview is really important.
I think too, especially when you're getting out of school, in school you're working in a lot of group projects, and so a group of 4 of you can end up with the same project in your book. So it's really important to be able to tell, you know, the company that you're trying to get a job with exactly what your role was in that group project. That's a big thing we look for when we're seeing, you know, we're all going to the same schools, we're seeing the same books, is to find out who's, you know, exactly contributing to the work and how they're contributing. And I think whenever you go somewhere, I've had even people at all levels of the industry come in without anything to show their book, no laptop, no iPad, I would even take a printed book over nothing. Really, whenever you're coming into an interview or even an informational meeting, you should have your book and your work on you. It's really what's going to represent you, and really what you don't want to expect a creative director to go drag their laptop off their desk and bring up your website.
With regard to this interview, what sort of questions should candidates be thinking about, or be aware of, or be ready for? What are your favourite opening and closing questions, and where have you seen mistakes that have been made? And perhaps you could say a little bit more about how we could prepare these guys for the kinds of questions that they're going to be asked at that first stage.
One that I've found that's tripping up people at schools is that I just ask, what are you looking to do? And if your answer is to get a job, well, we're all looking for a job. When I'm talking to a creative about what they want to be doing, I want to hear, like, I want to be doing this kind of project, or work with this kind of people, or work with this kind of client, or this kind of brand. You know, have some thought into what you want to be, you know, what you want your first job to be. Everyone, you know, we all want a first job out of school, but being able to articulate to me what you're looking for is really important.
Yeah, I mean, the first question that I would ask is why Adidas? And if you can't answer that, then for me the interview's over, and I don't even need to see your work if you can't answer that.
That's exactly what I was about to say. I really like candidates who want us and have an interest in working for us and a point of view about what they want to do for us and enthusiasm about it. So the first question I always ask candidates at any level for any job is, why are you here? And I look for really great answers for that. And to your point, you know, I kind of tune off if they're just there looking for a job.
What are some of the more unusual questions that are asked either by yourselves or your colleagues when it comes to getting to the heart of the matter and finding out if these guys are going to be suitable for you? What tricks can they expect?
I've had creatives ask candidates, if you were, some of the crazier questions are, if you were a superhuman, what would your superpower be? And we always joke about those, and it's not really to throw you off, or, you know, what's your favorite color or anything like that. It's really just to see how you'll react. Because a certain company I worked for, if they couldn't handle even being asked the question, they probably weren't going to fit in culturally. It was a really laid-back company. We worked really hard, but we played really hard. I think, you know, you have to take everything in stride and just think of an interview as more of a conversation. That's how when I interview, I think I'm just going to have a talk with a person. I'm not, it becomes less that question and answer shootout session and more just about having a conversation around your work or your career or what's going on in the industry.
Yeah, I'd second that. Not really trick questions. I mean, when we sit down, it's really for a simple conversation about the work. We want to understand a little bit more, like, how you were thinking about it. So, I mean, maybe the trickiest question is, like, what were you thinking, in the most positive possible sense of the question. But yeah, there's no trick questions. It's really like just a sincere conversation about the work for the most part.
I think for us, it's, I tend to ask, depending on the level that I'm interviewing with, I'll start to ask more situational type interviews or questions, and it could be, you know, and it could be even at a student level, is you know, what project do you feel like you failed at, or it didn't turn out the way you wanted, and what could you have done to improve it? Simple things like that, just to get a better understanding of how they react to a loss or something that has failed, because that's very much a part of our day. We have projects that people work on for 18 months that get dropped, and how do they react to that? So it's a real life.
We ask questions of that nature as well. We call them behaviorally based interview questions, and they are highly situational, asking you about how you handle different types of situations, how you plan and manage your time, how you handle setbacks is a great example. Questions that give us a sense of what your communication and collaboration skills are, because that's really inherent and important to our overall corporate culture, but particularly to the creative process.
Can I ask you a question about showing me the money? Let's say that we finally get into this interview. They're poor, they want the money, they need the money. How best to handle this often tricky, murky subject of, well, how much money are you actually going to pay me? How to handle that question from a candidate's point of view? They want to know right up front how much they're going to be earning off you. How should they handle that? How do you handle it?
I would say just, there's no need to be shy about asking for, what you want. But at the same time, most entry-level positions, they're typically salary guidelines, that the company is operating under, and so they have maybe a little bit of room to move. So I would say, if you have something in mind, ask for it. There's no reason to be shy about it. But don't necessarily expect to get it if it falls outside those parameters. And just know that, they're, especially at the entry level, I mean, later on, as you moved up and been promoted a few times, there's a lot more leeway, based on talent or specific skills, but coming right out of school, most companies don't have a lot of room to move on money. There's just a narrow band of salary ranges that they're going to offer.
Yeah, if you're in a position where you feel that you need to ask the question, I would ask what the range is, not a hard and fast number. Recruiters are typically more comfortable talking about ranges than an absolute.
Yeah, I would just second that. I mean, I think ranges are something we have bandwidths of grade levels, and I would ask, what's the typical, if you're not comfortable with that bandwidth, what is the typical progression for to be promoted in the company? So is it 1 year, is it 2 years, is it 3 years? What's kind of the percentage of your chances?
That makes me think, also, if you're too focused on the money, you're probably focused on the wrong thing, because I would say that priorities in choosing to work somewhere should be, am I in the right city? Am I going to be doing the right kind of work? Am I in the right size company where I think I can thrive? Because the money variance is going to, I think it's going to be generally nominal, between, at the entry level, between one job and another. And if you find a place it's in a city you love, it's in a company that's the kind of size that you feel like you're going to thrive in, and is doing the kind of work that you're most interested in, you're more likely to do better there, and you're more likely to get raises and be promoted quickly, which is the more reasonable path towards getting more money if you do want that, is to get into the right place and sort of just, prove your value. So I guess I would say don't be afraid to talk about the money, but I wouldn't make that the driving decision.
And whatever you do, presumably don't say, show me the money. Okay.
I've never gone in and asked for a raise in my career. So,
what sort of questions would you expect candidates to ask you, and what are the questions that have really impressed you as part of this process from candidates when you've asked that question? Do you have questions for us?
I like it when people are interested in the direction of the company. It says that they're interested in what we're doing now, and they're curious about if that's going to change. I like that because already they're thinking in the right territory, like the nature of the work and whether it's right for them. But they're also just inherently looking forward, which is, I think, shows some foresight. So that's always one that I like to get and I like to answer.
I like questions that try to give candidates a sense of what the culture of the company is like, because I think that's an incredibly huge consideration for a candidate in taking a job at any point in one's career, whether it's at the entry level or later. I can't think of a great example of what those questions might be. I think it's kind of on an individual basis, what's important to you in terms of your lifestyle and what kind of a working lifestyle you want to have, and making sure that what your goals are outside of the nature of the work that you're doing are as it relates to the company.
Yeah, I would agree in terms of culture. When someone's trying to find out more about their team or who they're going to be working with, or just when people ask me about the culture of the agency, I think that's really important, and shows you're going to be spending a lot of time with the people you work with in your first job. So you want to really make sure that it's people you want to be spending all that time with.
Yeah, anytime you can ask questions about the culture, I think is key, because that's a big thing for obviously the employer. But also, like, if you're in the creative field, like, what do you guys do to get the designers together to be creative? Like, do you guys do off-sites, or like, what are some team things that you guys do in a company, so you have a better understanding of, wow, there's 70 people in this department, I'll be part of that, and they do these kind of cool, like, just to have a better understanding of the culture is really key.
Thinking about after the interview's over, how do you like candidates to respond or thank you for the interview? What are their next steps? What should they be doing immediately after that interview?
Sending thank you emails. They're so rare still, which is quite shocking. A lot of people too like getting handwritten thank you notes, which is really old school, I guess. But just letting the person who took time out of their busy work schedule to meet with you for however long, you should thank them for giving you that time, and if you can, say something poignant about the conversation, and ask what the next steps are and how you can keep it going in this process and talking to this company.
I agree with everything.
Yeah.
I think the thing for me, though, is that if you have a connection with somebody and there might not be a position open at that time, is that you make them aware of when you update your work, where they can find it. And it's not so much sending a 10 meg email to the person, because that usually bogs down their email, but just a friendly reminder if it's a website they can go to, or if it's just a little one page of just some things that they've been working on, because it's really important to see progression in people's careers, and networking is key in the industry, that you make sure that you get yourself out there as much as possible.
If you go through an interview process and you don't get a job, there could be any number of reasons that are unknown to you why you didn't get it. And if you feel that you had a great connection with the interviewer and you really thought it was a brand and a company that you could respond to and work for, absolutely keep that door open by maintaining communication through the interview with the interviewer, either through LinkedIn or through sending follow-up emails. And I love the idea of receiving updated work that people are doing to, again, see the progression of what they're doing, and really kind of be in touch with where they're at in their career. Oftentimes, there might come an opportunity that isn't even posted online that, if someone is in your mind, you call because they've been continuing to follow up with you and you know that they're interested. So it's important to keep those communications strong.
I have an example. I went to a school out in the Midwest, and I interviewed a bunch of people there. We had a portfolio review, and then I gave a presentation, and I walked through a certain transportation department, and I saw an amazing ability of some of these people I was interviewing, or that were there. And this person had already committed to a competitor of ours, which was, well, really, it's not really a competitor, it's Skechers. But I didn't. I was a little upset. Because I didn't know if this guy could perform. He had an amazing portfolio. He was a very good person. We really hit it off. And as much as you guys are looking for a job, a company is always recruiting. And I kept that person's name. And I had a recruiter call them a year later. And it happened to be that Skechers shut down their innovation department and they didn't need as many people. He was let go, and then it was we were able to bring him into the company. So it's just important that there is this play, as much as you guys do your follow-ups, that it's never a dead end, and there's always possibilities that a company could be always in mind for you, or you could be obviously in mind for the company. So.
One last question from me before I turn it over to the audience, and it's my favorite question. What question were you expecting from me that you didn't get from me that you think I should have asked? That's got me out of more trouble than I care to admit getting into.
That's a stumper.
I don't know if I have a question, but there's one thing. We just had some guy, it wasn't for a design position, which I normally interview for, but some guy came into the office last week, or maybe a couple of weeks ago, interviewing for a developer position. He came in and put his feet up, like in the chair next to him. And everybody in the interview just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And they actually just ended the interview. And I think, I guess the takeaway from that is maybe be careful not to be too, to be overconfident or too informal. Like, our offices are very informal, but on the flip side of that, we take the work very seriously. So, you don't have to wear a suit, obviously. I mean, that might actually not be so productive for you, but we want you to take the interview seriously and take your work seriously, and yes, it's something like putting your feet up. I mean, maybe he was just a little nervous, or I don't know, it was really weird, but yeah, take it seriously. Like, don't confuse the informality of a lot of design, offices, designer-oriented offices as something like casual through and through. It's just on the surface.
I'd also, just ask a lot of questions, and make sure that you have a presence about you when you're in the interview. That's important, I think, just to be able to articulate your ideas, what you're trying to go for in whatever profession and career it is.
I think the biggest thing is your book. Right now, it's what the work that's coming out of schools. I went to Carnegie Mellon a long time ago, and I was just back there this past couple weeks ago recruiting, and they were doing stuff. The program I was in was doing some work where I was like, we never would have touched this when I was in school. The work coming out of schools right now, people you're competing with for jobs, it's a pretty high level. So it is really all about, kind of what we've said a couple times, your book is what's going to get you into that interview and get you in the door.
Lovely. Well, thank you. I'd like to throw it open now to questions from the floor. Please ask your questions from the microphones that you can see on either side, so that we can hear you properly. But do we have any questions for this rather illustrious panel? Sure. Please feel free to make your way towards one of these microphones. And line up. By all means, line up after this gent if you've got another question that you'd like to ask as well. Save us some time.
Hello. Hi. So how do you guys feel about us showing projects that don't necessarily relate to maybe the position you're hiring for, but something we're really passionate about anyways?
You have to be able to relate it in some way to what the employer's business is. If you can logically explain it and how it can relate, whether it's in terms of the thought process or the technique that you've used, that's okay.
I really love seeing that stuff. It shows me another part to the person and what they're doing, maybe outside of the industry I'm hiring for, and I think that's where you get your creativity from. And I was interviewing a designer, a guy was a designer and a developer, and we were just not loving what was in his book. And then we went to his personal section and saw all his passion projects, and we hired him off those. And he's an amazing. It was the best decision we ever made. So I think that's a really good, important point, is have things in your book that also show you and what you care about, and not just student projects.
Yeah, I would say that too. Just don't make that the entirety of the presentation.
Yeah, if you can gear a project to who you're going after and who you want to be employed by, it's great if you can do that, just so they can see your thought process.
You can mock something up before you go to an interview for them.
Thank you for the question. Lovely. Another question, please.
Hi, I'm Mike.
Hey, Mike.
Hi. Hi, Adidas. My question is, I'm someone who has, I guess, more breadth than depth in their skill set. For somebody like me who has a bunch of different pieces of work that aren't necessarily interrelated and may not on their own be related to the job I'm applying for, but interconnected, form sort of a connection there. Would it make more sense to emphasize the breadth of my work or to focus on individual pieces?
I think somebody said superpower earlier. I think you do need to explain your superpower, but I think in the creative field you can have many facets of your expertise that can influence and evolve. So I started in illustration, and I've crossed industrial design, graphic design, you name it, within projects. So I think but you do need to show what you're really good at.
Thank you. Another question. And please, come on down if you have questions.
Hi. I was just wondering if you're applying to a company that is really concerned with the role that social media plays in their business, if you're not a big participant in a lot of social media, should you become one? Get involved in Twitter and all that?
Yes.
Okay.
If it's important to, yeah. If you can usually tell too when people are faking it. So if you want to work for a social media company, you should be interested in social media, maybe.
Okay.
How can you tell they're faking it?
Just when a Twitter feed that's really not, that's just chatting with their friends or just checking in on Foursquare, things like that.
Anything to add, panelists, on social media?
I think just to add to social media, it's really, we're in a consumer products company, and and with social media now, it's like we use that daily, and our social media department, we're creating social media departments because of how important it is to the industry. So it's happening a lot now in just manufacturing and product design companies, that it's not necessarily a social media company, but we use that information daily on how that interacts with consumers.
Thank you. Question over here.
When applying for jobs online, it'll often ask for a portfolio, but is it better to send an abbreviated version of your portfolio rather than the whole thing all at once? Because then it may give you the opportunity to explain things in more detail in person? Or would it be better just to send the whole portfolio?
I personally think it's better to send an abbreviated version that is really targeted to the brand, with a note that you have a more extensive portfolio that you would love to review with the interviewer in person.
I think for a lot of us too, it's a link. It's so, with all the sites, Crop and Cargo, and it's so easy to get your work up online, that it's worth investing the time just to put it up. It's just a URL.
Yeah, is your portfolio physical?
It's, I have a physical and a PDF, and also I have a site on Coraflat, so
yeah.
It's kind of everywhere, but I've just heard different things that it might be better to kind of concentrate the projects down to a couple of pages and send just that, rather than your full portfolio. But I've heard different views on it.
Yeah, I feel like it's a 6 of one, half dozen. I don't know if it is going to be a difference maker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, please.
Sorry, I'm short.
Jump.
Hi. Let's say you have an interview or a meeting with the recruiter that doesn't go too well. What do you do then? How long do you wait to contact the company? Yeah.
What happened?
If it goes badly, is there like a grace period? Should we wait some time before we talk to the company again? What should we do to make it so that the next time, if we really love this company, we're prepared and we're ready to take on the task to talk to someone?
I think I would try to ask him, again, I don't know, it kind of depends on what way it went wrong, but I would ask for some feedback, because that's the only way you're going to really know how you might adapt either your presentation or the work you're showing, or your approach. And if you don't get that, I'm not sure, but maybe the recruiters in the panel might have a better idea when to come back to the company.
Okay.
I think asking for feedback is great, especially at the stage you're in. You know, you're right out of school, so I think asking for feedback is fine. And also, I mean, as a creative coming into a company, lots of people see recruiters as gatekeepers because we see the books first. But if someone goes to like one of my creative directors and gets their work in, and the creative director loves it, and the creative director comes to me and was like, I want to meet this person, then I'm going to get that person in. So maybe to like try to find other ways of meeting people within the company and just finding out more about what you can do and how you can be a part of it.
Yeah, I would ask for feedback, and it could be, you could propose that, could you do a project for them to even show your desire to be with that company or brand.
That's a good one. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Take the next two here and then two over there.
Hi, I'm Madeline. If you have a connection with a company and you're really eager to work there, how do you nurture that relationship without coming off as too overbearing, like bugging them too much?
That's a really good question because there's definitely a line, and there's no way to say exactly where it is. It's just keeping in contact. After some recruiters are great about getting back to people, some aren't. It's just trying to keep a normal level of connect with them on LinkedIn, shoot out an email just to check in, and just keep your search going.
Email is probably better than phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little easier to digest.
Yeah, and I think a good strategy is, I find this people doing this a lot, in part because I recommend it, but a lot of light contact is like if for example you sent your resume and they haven't responded, light contact is good. Like people following me on Twitter, oftentimes I'll just go see their website, and if their work is good, I'll shoot the name over to the recruiter. So Twitter, LinkedIn are really like lightweight ways to engage with people. And if you're not getting traction through the normal channel, you might get it there, but I would say if you don't hear anything at that point, then yeah, I would say an email like once every few months or something, like, because otherwise it's just going to be annoying.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, what do you think is the best way for a student to figure out what size company they should work for when they have really limited experience with working in any creative field?
You've got to I started in my industry by working in a really small company and swearing I'd never work in a big company, and now I work in a really big company. You've got to just internships, kind of just jumping in and seeing, what it's like. Definitely internships and probably freelancing too. If you could do that, just to spend a couple weeks, a couple months in a place and see if it's what you like.
Sure, thank you.
A question over here, please.
Hello. When someone is presenting a project to you, what are some of the things you'd like to hear about that project, such as process work, problem and solution, or what makes it innovative?
All those.
What inspired it?
Yeah, I think for me it's, in the field that we're in, is how does it relate to the consumer, for one. But yeah, what inspired you? Why is that right for the consumer? Why do we need that in this world right now? Why do we need another one of the, shoe or whatever the concept is? But, good ideas, innovation.
Yeah, good ideas, like smart thinking, insights, like the key design decisions, like just want to see how it's less trying to, get to the bottom of that project, but more to understand how you think and what you care about, what your priorities are. But yeah, I'd agree.
Thank you. And next question with the lady behind.
Hi, I'm T. Hi. When we are being interviewed with different people, like sometimes we meet with HR people, sometimes we meet with the leading artists. Is there any difference, like when we presenting ourselves? Should we focus on different aspects when we meet different people? Like the difference between HR people and the artist, or?
I think you need to follow the cue of the interviewer. You're right that their approach might be a little bit different, but really pay attention to what they're asking you to show them. and be in tune to the pace that they expect. You know, I think as an HR person, I probably don't spend as much time looking at individual projects in a portfolio, but I absolutely look at the portfolio. I just expect the pace to be a little quicker probably than someone on the creative team.
Yeah, and I've had interviews where there's like one piece of one project that we'll spend, 20 minutes talking about. We'll just send us off on kind of a tangent. And so I think it's maybe just, if you're dealing with the creatives in the company, focus on the work, and maybe when you're talking to a recruiter, a little bit broader picture of like who you are and what you want to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Another question over here.
Yeah, hi. So I have a different case here. I've done my undergraduate in computer science and I have 3 years of work experience in coding. But now I'm doing masters in human-computer interaction, and I'm really passionate about working in UX, UI, and IXD. So how do you think are design firms open to this, such kind of a candidate who has a very technical background, but now is like, I think I have a decent portfolio. So how do you think, are they open, and how should I go about with it?
Yeah, you can have people very interested in that set of skills right now. In particular, any tech company, small or large, in Silicon Valley is dying for interaction designers that can prototype and have familiarity with client-side code. We too at Otapod are very interested in that. So in terms of presenting, I mean, that work is sometimes challenging to present because it sits at this place between, it's maybe not super polished in terms of the way it looks, and you have to dig into it to understand whether the code is good. So they're challenging to present, but I think if you can take ideas and make prototypes, and then just talk through the thinking and the approach to building them in the interviews, I think you won't have any trouble. And there is a lot of demand for that right now.
Okay.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the answers. Last question.
For portfolio websites, I've seen both where it's been kind of like a blank slate, just showing off the work and nothing else, and then I've also seen portfolio websites that have a lot of interactive material, and their actual portfolio is something that they can show off work with. Which would you prefer so far as the portfolio website? Do you feel that including more is kind of cluttering, or would you rather just have a blank slate just showing the work?
If the way you built your site, your customized personal site is really good and interesting, then I want to see that. If it's a good experience, but if it's clunky and it's big and it loads really slow, then I would stick to the slate.
I think just for how, like, we have designers that go on Coreflot and different websites and just look at people who post their stuff to see if there's any, hot talent out there that we want to go after. But I guess if the person knows about you, great, yeah, show them your site if it's pretty in-depth and it shows your creative process. But there's something about these other sites that can obviously be a tool, amongst other designers of how you separate yourself. And I always feel like in design that you need to be able to show your conceptual process in some form as well as the finished product. So however you need to do that and you can convey that, the better.
Yeah, my opinion on this has changed over the years. I used to think it was really important for somebody to design their own website, but I've kind of gotten to the point where I would say invest a lot of energy in your own site only if you feel like the projects that you have don't represent the full, they don't accurately represent your talents, and you feel like you want to, there's something left that you need to express by designing your own website. Otherwise, I think the work in a pretty austere presentation should do the trick.
Thank you for the question. Great set of questions, a great set of answers, if I do say so myself. I'm very pleased with the quality of the questions and responses. Could we show our appreciation, please, with a round of applause for our panelists?